It's time. Washington's biggest pro day ever.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's not Lars Hanson. That's Ben Glassmire. He's a writer for me over at Huskies Wire, as I am the editor over there. And that down there, that's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. You can check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Ben, like we teased at, as all our everydayers know, at the end of our Wednesday show, that we're going to be bringing you on because we're going to do some pro day talk. And I've got to get this. I got to get this out of my system now. I hate you. Whoa. Because I was waiting for that reaction. You know, I used to be the nerd that everybody, I of course I'm joking, but I used to be the nerd that everybody came to for all their NFL draft advice. And then I met you. You are one of my favorite people on this planet. You do such a fantastic job with your draft analysis and everything. With Washington's biggest pro day ever, as it is today on Thursday, as all of our everydayers are listening to this. It's time. There are so many guys that we need to talk about. So Lars and I felt that we needed to bring you in. So we're going to let you kick things off today.
Well, that's a nice surprise for the start of the podcast. Was not expecting to be showered with praise early, but right back at you, right back at both of you.
Hey, we appreciate that.
Yeah, obviously it was, as you said, it's Washington's biggest pro day ever. This is it. Like this will be my second pro day that I'll be attending. First one was, I can't even remember who was there now that I think about it. But it was
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah, that was my first, and it's definitely not. It's going to be a little different this time. This is going to be a little bit of a different show. We have all the guys participating. Obviously, we are going to talk about, but we just got news that Rome is not going to be participating in the pro day. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I was looking forward to see him test in person, but as we're going to kind of hit on, he doesn't need it. So,
right, Lars, what's one thing that you're really looking forward to watching?
Yeah, I was going to say, of the guys we're looking forward to watching, I'm curious probably the offensive linemen, how much they do, how many drills they do. Because, again, none of these guys really need to run and test in that sense. I mean, it's more or less this is an opportunity for teams to work them out individually, whereas at the combine, you kind of get some of that. You can kind of maybe get some one-on-one, but not as much as you do at a pro day. And that's when you kind of get to see which teams are identifying, some of these players. And I think especially for Roger Rosengarten, because one guy we talked on the show about is kind of moving up the draft boards. Obviously, Troy Fautanu, well solidified himself in the first round. That's without question. But how much can Roger vault himself up even just a little bit more potentially into that first round mix? Because otherwise, we already know what Mike's going to do. We already know Rome. I will say the two other receivers, Jalen, Polk and McMillan, what do they do, right? Because again, both those guys they probably should test, but then you could also kind of understand why maybe they'll do some testing but not do a 40, right? And then the other thing is going to be how well can Mike kind of help those guys out when he does throw? Because I have to imagine Mike will throw for those guys, because otherwise who's throwing to him?
No, you're right. So that's where I was going to take this. Was I want to talk about Mike, and not just, hey, shout out to him for running into him on the way to Danny Sprinkle's press conference today. But on top of that, Mike throwing, it's all quarterbacks throwing is always just the most watched thing in a pro day. That's what people go for. The throwing a ball 70 yards in shorts. It happens every single year. Apparently JJ McCarthy had the greatest workout anybody has ever seen, according to Jim Harbaugh. I don't want to get into that. But with Mike, on top of that, with the throwing, which is something we all know that he's going to excel at because we've seen him do it time and time again. But on top of that, I'm curious to see if he tests. And if he does test, what some of that is going to look like, because he put out a tweet on Wednesday saying, just because, I don't run and I don't have to, doesn't mean I'm not athletic. So I respect that. And if he does do some testing, I feel like we would see some decent numbers out of him, which might just kind of put a whole different conversation around him, where right now it's all about the injuries, all about so many different things that, especially that he can't really control. So if he goes out and shows that he does have some, I don't want to say top tier, but above average at the very least athleticism, that, hey, this is a guy that needs to solidify himself as not just a first round pick, but maybe a top 15 guy.
Yeah, I kind of just want to, we're talking about kind of Mike and quarterbacks at the pro day, that whole discussion. I just want to get it off my chest before we keep going. I think they are like, they go viral. We see the Caleb Williams throwing, we see the JJ McCarthy throwing, Josh Allen throwing, they're like it's gonna get blown out of proportion because Mike is gonna throw really, really well. We know that's what he does really well. His arm is magnificent and it's gonna be amazing to see it. But in the end, we all know that he has a strong arm. Every NFL team already knows that. We don't need to double count it. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be awesome. But we don't need to like talk. It's going to get talked up. And it's really not going to help his stock anymore because it's something that is already known. I do think you kind of talked about the testing. I do think that would be interesting. I think it's hard to when we don't know the number that we could put on his athleticism just because he didn't run a whole lot at Washington and that just wasn't really a part of his game. So it would be interesting to see the number. I don't think teams are going to look at that and be like, oh my gosh, he ran whatever he would end up running is sure. Like, that's like an awesome number that we are really excited about. It's cool, but it's just not his game to run. So I could see why he would test. It would be a little bit shocking to me if he did test. Just because it's kind of like goes to the Rome conversation. It doesn't really help him in the end. It's just a nice little number to put on it, and teams may like that. But in the end, I don't really think it changes anything about his game.
No, I agree. Lars, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, I'm glad you asked about that because I was trying to find the video, and I think I just found it, where I asked Penix after, it was a November 11th game, so don't ask me who they played.
That was Utah.
That's what I thought. But one of those two. Where I asked him, I was like, hey, you had that run. Was that your effort in showing that you can do it? He's like, no, that's like, I don't need to run, but when I break one for 50, yeah, you guys can't be surprised when I do it. And I think that's kind of the point of what we're getting at is Mike didn't need to run. Ben, to your point, Ryan Grubb emphasized, look, I don't want my quarterback running. I don't want flat out. Like, he's in quarterback for a reason. We got running backs for a reason. But when the pocket does break down, and again, in the NFL, pocket's going to break down. That's just the nature of the beast. Is he athletic enough to buy enough time? I think so. And and again, Ben, to your point, you can't really put a number on that. There's no, the number you could put on that is sacks and sack avoidance. And look how many times he was sacked in his career at Washington. Now, again, not every offensive line is going to be like that, but where Penix is probably going to go in the draft is going to be to a somewhat better team than the team picking in the top 10, like Caleb Williams, like Drake May, where it's like, wow, you're going to a team that's picking early, probably don't have a great offensive line in front of you. Daniel Jones would attest to that in the New York Giants. Daniel Jones not that great either way, but having no
yeah, we don't need to get into that discussion.
but the point, it does not help when you don't have at least a somewhat serviceable offensive line. Mike, I think, is somebody who can make a good offensive line either good or even a little bit better because of his decision making. And I think that to me is going to be what, and that's honestly to teams is going to be what matters more is can he just get rid of the ball, live to fight another down versus great. Now we're second and 18, and now we're third and 30 because our quarterback pulled a Jake Browning and did a pirouette backwards for 25 yards. I love Jake, but I had to get that in there.
No, that's 100% fair. So one thing that, before we move on, because it's Washington's biggest pro day ever. So we're going to make one prediction now. Head coaches plus general managers. What number is it? Just real quick off the top of your heads before we move on. I'm going to go with 12.
Ooh. Head coaches and general managers?
Plus, yeah, combine them.
I'm going to say 10.
10, okay.
I was going to put the over-under on 11.5, and I would take the over, but again, it's to Ben's point. It's not going to be more than 24, right? It's not going to be like a full flock, especially, but at the same.
Well, one thing we have to consider in that, one thing we got to consider in that as well is North Carolina's pro day, same day. So there are going to be a lot of people watching Drake May at the same time.
I think Mike will help a lot with like the numbers of, GMs, and because those are the ones they go to. They go to the quarterbacks one, and to your point, Drake May, like those are the ones that they're going to end up going to.
Right. Well, and actually, Roman, I'm gonna traditionally counter on you on this because Drake May is going to go top 3. There might be more teams looking at Mike than there will be a Drake May.
See, that's fair. I know for certain that that's where the Patriots are going to be. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhat split between those two. And that, with that being said, one player to watch for whatever reason, who wins the day? And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week we're picking one team that stands out, team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The NC State Wolfpacker, obviously this week's Nissan Rogue, the team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in their first two games in the tournament with wins over Texas Tech and Oakland. They have set themselves up to play Marquette in the Sweet 16, and they say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Wolfpack have done here. You can take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure by shopping at nissanusa.com. And with some great friends here in Ben and Lars, we also got to give a shout out to our friends over at Better Together. Just playing on Better Together is so much more fun. Is your bracket already busted? Are you tired of the same old daily fantasy grind where you make a roster, cross your fingers, and hope for the best, or losing on the last leg of your pick 'em entry? Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs and you can play with your friends, not against them. Just pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social DFS movement. It's super cool because it makes you realize that DFS is fun alone, but like a lot of other things, it's better when doing it with friends. You can show that synergy from working together gives you better chances at winning than going at it alone, because it's all about the team. Download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Remember the code LOCKEDON because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. All right. So one player that I want to say wins the day, because there are a whole lot of different ways we could take this. But Ben, we'll start with you. Who is one player that you're really keeping an eye on tomorrow that you think wins the day in one way or another?
I'm gonna steal Lars's bit here. I'm gonna go with Roger Rosengarten.
Okay.
He already dominated the combine. We saw that. I wrote that up over at Huskies Wire when that happened. I loved his performance. I've loved Roger Rosengarten for like 2 seasons now. I followed him really closely since last season, watching his development, and he's such a fun player. And I love that he's finally getting the recognition that it seems like he's deserved for so long, because he's such an athletic player. He's so technically sound. The coaching staff did a tremendous job getting him ready to play. And as such a, that quiet player, you don't ever hear about him. And that's exactly what you want as an offensive lineman. You don't ever want to hear their name. But in terms of the combine, he even exceeded my expectations. We knew that he was athletic, but testing off the charts in so many categories was so impressive. I even think he has room to improve. It seems like he has room to improve. So going into this pro day in front of NFL teams, like we talked about, with more of a personal setting with a lot of these NFL teams, getting in front of them, talking with coaches, talking with scouts up front and in a smaller audience will be huge for him, because I really think that teams have already fallen in love with him and want to take him early. It's just a matter of getting him in front of those specific teams who really do like him. And then, kind of taking that next step where, okay, we're going to maybe take him, the end of round 1, or it probably in round 2. That's probably where he's going to end up going. But if those teams in round 2 do get that face-to-face conversation with him and get to test him, do drills with him up front with him, that could be huge for him in just giving that little extra boost if that's, 10 picks higher than what he could have been.
Lars, who you got?
I'm glad you took Roger, because as much as I love Roger, I need to talk about somebody else. So I'm kind of torn between Bralen Trice and one of the 2 receivers, right? So I'm going to take Bralen Trice just because splitting hairs with the receivers is not fair. Bralen Trice is one of those guys where he should be a day 2 pick, right? I don't think he's obviously not going to be a first round pick, but there's too much tools there to not be a second round pick. And I'm just curious, how much testing can he do? How much ground can he cover? Because he's somebody where, again, he's not a plug and play guy, but he's always going to give you effort. So I imagine he's going to see the field as a rookie. It's just how much can he see and what teams are more attracted to him than others, because, we talk about Tampa Bay all the time. They love Washington defensive players, but it's more than Tampa Bay, right? It's got to be somebody else other than the Bucs, because otherwise, again, if he goes to Tampa in the second round, that's fine. But I have to imagine there's plenty of other teams that are interested in Bralen. And so I'm kind of curious, because he's a name that I don't want to say has fallen, but just isn't being mentioned as much. And to kind of true your point about Roger, where it's like, okay, he's getting that recognition now. Bralen's a guy where I'm not saying he's not getting the recognition. And again, I understand he's nowhere near that first round, the first kind of wave of edge players coming off the board. but his motor, I have a hard time matching in the class. Now, again, there's going to be players that have similar motors. But when you look at, Jared Verse, all these other guys, Chop Robinson that Roman loves, and a few others, where it's like Bralen's got to test at least somewhat well to kind of get his name back into being talked about, because otherwise, if he starts slipping into the third or even farther, it's like somebody's going to get a steal, but it's going to be more like Elijah Molden, which was pretty criminal back in the day.
Oh yeah, so that's a good call out right there. I will say one thing I disagree with is I think he is a plug and play kind of guy at the next level, just because of that motor. For all the reasons that you described, I think that's something where, you can just plop him into a scheme and just say, all right, go do this one thing and you're going to be fine. So I want to stick along the defensive line here. And I went with somebody who wasn't invited to the NFL Combine, and that's MJ Ale. Because MJ is a super promising defensive lineman, where he really did improve every single game that we saw him play over the last 2 years at defensive tackle. There's somebody who made the transition after playing offensive line for his first couple of years on campus. And I don't want to say he turned into a game wrecker, but he turned into somebody that really, like, the more that this, especially his second season went along, the more it seemed like he was starting to figure out how to actually play the position and use his leverage and wreak havoc in the backfield. And as he continues to do that, I think with a good day of testing, I think teams might be able to say, ooh, hey, who's this guy? We're always looking for more fresh bodies to rotate at defensive tackle. And this dude's 6'6", 330, 340. We can absolutely find a way to use him. And he's somebody who I think can get himself drafted with a really good day. But at the very least, he's going to put himself in front of NFL teams, and he's going to say, you need to invite me to a camp, and I will find a way to make way onto your roster.
Yeah, I love that pick too, because you kind of talked about, like, teams are always looking for guys like that. Teams are always looking for guys who can just be space eaters, like in the middle of that defensive line. I look at a guy like Nestor Jade Silvera, who was at ASU last year. And I don't think he got drafted, but he caught on with the Raiders. And he's kind of that same mold of player, same like nose tackle, kind of, however you want to label it, run defender. And I think if you look at a guy like Ale, who doesn't have experience playing the position, like he is brand new to the position, teams are going to look at that and say, okay, we can work with the tools here. We can work with the size here. So if you get that, it doesn't even have to be like an amazing testing day. Like, we don't need him to be this amazing, crazy athlete at that kind of size. But if at least you're like an above average or even average athlete at that size, being a good run defender who a team can look at you and say, okay, I see the tools. I see that you can develop. We're going to stick you on a practice squad for, a year or two, and you're going to become a rotational player for us. That is at the very least something that will go in that UDFA, like, priority free agent range, where a lot of teams would want him even if they don't draft him.
Absolutely. You guys got anybody else you want to make sure we bring up? Sorry, Lars, go ahead.
Well, two things. Edifano Pusher is the other player that I wanted to plug that I didn't get. I chose Bralen over him because, again, tell me that Edifano Pusher was not an old school linebacker who will play 5 to 10 years in the league if he doesn't stay healthy, if he stays healthy, right? Like, and I think, and Eddie, because go back to his freshman year as a walk-on, 2 forced fumbles in his college debut. Like, that was out of nowhere. And Eddie's just kind of been that quiet guy. Again, the injuries didn't help, but he clearly played well last season. I think he played well enough to prove that he's not quote unquote injury prone or something like that. And so he's another guy where I'd be curious to see how many teams start taking that look on him in day 3, or more like a day 3 pick. Let's be real.
I think he's got a chance to push himself into day 2 with a strong day for everything you just said, because and everything he can do on the field. He's a really good athlete. We've seen it all. And he's just such a smart, instinctual football player that when you combine all of those things, where this is not a very good linebacker class, where there's Peyton Wilson, there's Junior Colson, there's Jermaine Gresham Jr. I was going to say, I'm forgetting somebody's name. I shouldn't do that. But there are some of these guys that those are the top names in the class right now, and they're middle of day 2 picks at best right now. So I don't think that Edifon is going to be the first linebacker off the board, but I think that there's going to be a spot middle of the 3rd round, let's say, where those 3 guys might be gone. And it's, hey, yeah, no, we really liked Edifon Ulofoshio from talking to him in the combine, from talking to him at the pro day, from seeing just his athleticism and seeing everything he's been able to do. And with the experience that he has, he's somebody that can be plugged in right away, just as a starter from day 1, because we all know how smart he is on the football field. So that's a really good call out by you.
Yeah. And again, when you just look at, without kind of cheating a little bit, Well, the other point I wanted to make on MJ Ale was he does not look like he carries 330 or 360, like 340. Like he looked
right.
Then to your point, like he's not a run stuffer. Like when you look at Byron Murphy or some of those guys with Texas, like they look like they were big. Like those are definitely run eaters. MJ, also go back and look at the Oregon game. That last play on that third down drive, he made a similar play that Sam Tamani made to actually force Oregon into that fourth down situation.
Guys, got anybody else you want to shout out?
Can I hit on Bralen one more? Can I hit on?
Please,
talk about
please.
Trice a little more? Yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring up because I think he was one of the more baffling players to me, and you guys talked about it with the motor, but he came in I think it ended up being 30 pounds under his listed weight at the combine, and then to run that a little bit, it was a disappointing 40. I think we can kind of all agree on that. It was not what we expected from him. I was so baffled by that result because he looked, when you watched him on film, he looked like he was that 270 even if that was a little bit of an aggressive measurement, it looked like he was 265, 270. He looked like he had that on his frame. And then to see him come in at 200, I think it was like 245 pounds at the combine, and then to run that, I kind of wonder like what else was, if something else was going on at that time that kind of caused this weird result. I just want to see him bounce back. Like as long as he bounces back, maybe he gets his weight back up to where he was at Washington. Maybe he stays at that weight and then he just bounces back either way. I think that could just be huge for him to kind of get it back on track. Cause I feel like I was at like almost being okay with him being end of round one guy at his peak when he was dominating. And then you see that result and you're kind of like, okay, if he's going to lose weight and not run very well, it's like, okay, there's like something's not right here because it doesn't match. The tape doesn't match what he's showing in testing. So as long as he can do one of those things, either add weight and then still run, decently well, or just run better at a lighter weight, I think that will be huge for him getting back on track into that day 2 range.
So Ben, that's a really great way to lead into our third and final segment here today, which is going to be just some of the things we're on the lookout for as we get to Washington's Pro Day. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Fire TV, because Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free, and that includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV lets you dive into all the game analysis from highlights and more to keep up on all the latest in the world of sports, from March Madness, the NBA, the MLB, and so much more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. You can check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels yet, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. So, Ben, I'm really glad you brought up Bralen Trice in that last segment, because one thing that I'm personally going to be really on the lookout for is Dillon Johnson as a whole, where he didn't necessarily have the best athletic testing numbers, where we didn't expect him to test off the charts athleticism-wise, but we definitely expect him to run a little bit better in the 40, but we still know that that's not his game because he's shown so much on tape, and I really want to see what he can do with another opportunity in front of NFL testers and evaluators and everything like that, where is he going to focus more on the athleticism piece, or is he going to show, hey, I'm somebody who can be a true 3-down back, because he showed so much of his pass catching ability at Mississippi State, and then he showed that he's got all the rushing ability to go with that as well, rushing for 1,100 yards this past season. So he has all the tools. It's just a matter of, sometimes people will get really skewed by one certain number, usually that being the 40-yard dash. Shout out to Xavier Worthy. But you look at so much of that, and that's not what you need to get wrapped up in when you look at Dillon Johnson. You just need to look at the film and just say, this dude catches the ball really well. He's a fantastic pass protector. And, oh, yeah, he can also run the ball with the best of them. He's so strong. He always finishes really hard through contact. So that's one thing that I'm personally going to be on the lookout for, is just how Dillon performs on Thursday. Yeah,
I think it will be really important for him because, you talk about people get hung up on that 40 number. For running backs, it's like kind of like the quarterback's throwing. It's like kind of gets blown out of proportion. It's not I don't know the like specific numbers on like who's, best running backs in the NFL in their 40 times, but it's not like as long as you can see what he puts on film, it's not something that you need to really care about because, again, like you said, it's not his game. He is probably going to be that like day 3 guy who it feels like could rise up a depth chart in camp just because he can do everything. NFL teams are always looking to consolidate roles into one player and to have a guy who's a pretty good runner and a pretty good pass catcher. And, you know, he's shown the willingness to do everything, like be a pass blocker, do all that kind of stuff is so valuable. And to get a guy like that on day 3, just because he maybe didn't test super well, would be such a huge value for a team. So I think just even if it's not athletic testing, like you said, if he's getting in front of teams and doing the workouts, he's, you know, catching balls from Mike, he's doing all the things that you kind of expect running backs to do at a pro day, would just be so important for him to just kind of put that combine past him and just kind of take it as a wash.
Yeah, I mean, again, the other thing with Dillon is we all know how tough he is. Roman can attest to that more than anybody knows. Personally, how tough he is. Not that Roman and Dillon did anything, but Roman knows that story more than anybody else. And so I think that's kind of the other thing. It's his durability, right? Where, oh, well, he's been injured. But yeah, but look how quickly he's able to come back and play through it. Now, again, especially playing in that national championship game, like he was probably at, what, 50%? If we're being real here.
Yeah.
Maybe, I was trying to be nice. But, like, yeah, like, whereas another D kind of just segue onto one other player I wanted to talk about was Devin Culp. Speaking of somebody who tested really well, that's another guy that, again, if he can kind of back that up and show that, hey, that wasn't just a fluke or that, because again, it's electronic testing, so it's not, you know, hand time testing that he ran one of the fastest. Was it one of the fastest or the fastest?
It was one of the fastest, yeah.
That's what I thought, but it was one of the top like 3 or 4, if anything. But the point is, Devin showed that progress that I think warrants now him being drafted right. Again, it's kind of one of those guys where Westover probably won't work out, so Devin kind of gets his chance really to shine with Mike. And barring Devin returning to the 2021-22 Devin that had drops, I think Devin's kind of shown that he can solidify himself as worthy of being drafted because, again, he'll probably help on special teams. There's probably a number of things he can do, and just he's shown a betterness at blocking it. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. No one's going to compare him to Drew Sample in that regard, but he's done enough in that regard to make himself worth being selected, or at least put himself in that conversation too.
So, Lars, I'm really glad you brought up Devin Culp because that's somebody that we definitely need to talk about because I don't know if he's necessarily going to do the same testing all over again, and not to any fault of him. I think that what's more important for Devin is the on-field workouts because of exactly what you just said when it comes to the drops that show up on his tape where, you know, like we said, we all know that the pro day is a chance for some of these coaches to get closer and to have these times to work one-on-one with certain players that they might be interested in. And that's going to be what's most important for Devin, because not only do we see the athletic testing numbers and we see the drops, but we also just don't see him very much. And that's to no fault of his own, because he played an offense with Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk. Again, no fault of his own. So he doesn't necessarily have the numbers, the stats to back it up, where, you know, if somebody say wants to use a 4th round pick on him and Joe Schmo, who doesn't watch the NFL combine or anything, just says, oh, this guy has 280 yards as a receiver in his senior year. I'm not so sure about this pick. It goes so much deeper than that. And Devin can, you know, put that full display on film and just say, yeah, we can feel confident in this guy, not only as a pass catcher, but as a blocker as well, where we know he can do all those things, but it's just all about showing that to the NFL now.
Yeah, I think you look at that similar to how you look at it. We talked about Ole, and we talked about like that kind of developmental potential. Teams are going to look at a dude who runs a 4.45, I think is what it was, at tight end at his size. That, like, that's draftable just right there. Is that, like, you know, a surefire player who's going to be a stud in the league or is going to start or even, you know, make a roster going forward? Who knows? But that is he has such a moldable talent for an NFL team that they're going to look at that and be like, okay, it's okay to spend a day 3 pick on it because in the end, most likely the day 3 pick doesn't make the roster. So why not draft a guy that has that crazy upside to be such a good pass catcher if he can, you know, fix the drop issues, continue that progression as a blocker. Not saying he's ever going to be like, a great blocker that you're going to want to have on the field all the time in that regard. But as long as he can become serviceable and an NFL team can work with him and say, okay, we at least feel comfortable that he can be on the field as a blocker, then that alone, that potential alone will get him drafted, regardless of any of the drop issues that are in the past.
No, absolutely. So Ben, that brings us to you. What are you on the lookout for?
What am I feel like we covered it all, but I do want to hit on both the receivers. That's
a good way to end it. Yeah.
I don't know that they're going to test. Like, I don't know if it's worth it for them to test. We talked about with a lot of guys who've already tested. It's not really worth it for them to go through the whole testing process again. But I think putting them in a controlled environment with Mike throwing to them, hopefully, that is really important, because you put them in the combine setting. It's not a great setting to watch somebody catch passes from a quarterback they've never worked with and probably met, an hour before they did that workout. So getting them in a routine setting, getting to see, Jalen Polk make his crazy downfield catches, Jalen as a route runner, like that, just that kind of stuff that NFL teams are going to ask them to do in the pro day is going to be good just to make sure they can do it, just to verify for a lot of NFL teams that they can do it in this controlled environment with a quarterback that they have a relationship with and have a rapport with. So I don't think it's going to be like a crazy stock boost for either of them. Jalen Polk's probably locked in as that day 2 guy. That's like who NFL teams are looking for as a day 2 pick. Jalen's kind of more of the wild card just because of, this season was kind of up and down. But just getting him, especially in a controlled environment with Mike, will be really important. Just to make sure that he can do it. He's in a good place physically and all that stuff, all that type of stuff.
Lars, what do you think?
I don't disagree. I think the other thing that kind of, as Ben was saying, that was, I wonder which NFL coach is going to be helping the quarterbacks. Maybe one from Seattle that spent the past couple of years on Montlake, maybe.
That'd be interesting.
And that's something else where those guys would be able to have somebody familiar to go through everything with them. Because otherwise, what do you do? You're putting Brennan Carroll in there, or you're putting a GA in there.
I have a take. Oh, no. I have a take on who that might be, where it's been one of the names that has been most connected with Michael Penix throughout this draft process. And that's a gentleman by the name of Sean Payton with the Denver Broncos, where I wouldn't, I'm not saying this, obviously we'll find out when we get to the pro day. But that's just something that I believe where, there are obviously going to be head coaches and general managers there today, which isn't something we've been able to say in previous years of doing this event, where even when Trent McDuffie was there wasn't like a huge presence. Same thing for Joe Tryon, but there are certainly going to be head coaches and general managers watching Michael Penix, and the Broncos are looking for a quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Payton is just one of the guys that's there, and with just his acumen when it comes to working with quarterbacks, that he's going to be the one that would kind of just take the lead there. And with that being said, I feel like that's a really great place to wrap this one up. Ben, thank you so much for jumping on with us today. This has been so much fun. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And Lars, thank you as always for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We're coming at you with so much more stuff following the pro day. There were 2 press conferences that Lars and I were at today on Wednesday as we record this. So we've got so much more fun stuff coming for you. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you leave a like on the video. Hit that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Leave us a comment down below if you're audio only. Please leave us a 5-star review as well, as it all really does help the show out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Friday.